assault is the intent to cause harm.
To abuse someone is to, I guess, destroy them in many different ways. So you could emotionally destroy them or physically destroy them, just damage them and harm them.
What is corporal punishment? This is where school officials are allowed to punish students with physical punishment. This might be, typically it's striking the student a specific number of times in something that's premeditated and set. So for example, if you do X, you get hit 5 times with a ruler on the buttocks or on the hands, for example. This I know that if you live in the Northeast, you may not even realize that this exists in schools in parts of this country, but it does.
Currently, 19 states still allow corporal punishment in their public schools, including here in North Carolina, where just last year there were 404 incidents, over 20% of which were against kids with disabilities. In a study conducted by Dr. Richard A. Dubanowski, Michael Inaba, M.S., and Kent Gerkowicz, B.E.A., called Corporal Punishment in Schools, Myths, Problems, and Alternatives, they referred to corporal punishment as a, quote, sanctioned form of institutional child abuse, unquote. In another study in 2004 called Corporal Punishment in Schools, they said that the U.S. is one of only 3 industrialized nations left to allow corporal punishment in their public schools. The American Civil Liberties Union, or the ACLU, has a campaign against this form of punishment, especially against kids with disabilities, because, as the title may suggest, it's an issue of our civil liberties as students. These studies and more, as well as over 40 national organizations that are against corporal punishment, including the American Bar Association, Defense for Children International, and the U.S. Department of Defense Office of Dependent Schools Overseas, are trying to tell the country that the school is no place for such behavior.
Corporal punishment is forbidden in correctional facilities, mental institutions, and in the United States Armed Forces, but not in many public schools.
A growing controversy surrounding corporal punishment in schools.
Teachers are permitted to hit their students.
Like bruising and broken blood vessels after being paddled in school.
And where would you draw the line?
Strike one of his players on the backside with a heavy leather belt.
Meaning employees of the school of the state the right to spank your kids. That is a parental decision.
Over 200,000 students across the United States are hit by their educators every year.
We didn't believe it at first. We thought, no, this can't be happening, right?
There were also photos of children that had been beaten, and I do mean that beaten.
If it had been the exact same situation, except a parent versus a teacher, the parent would have been charged with a felony.
A child would have to be halfway dead in order for you to really get outside of the immunity that teachers have.
But guess what happened to me in school today? I spent 6 or 7 hours handcuffed to a pole for coming in without a belt.
Teachers become frustrated. They're ill-equipped to deal with some of the serious behavior problems.
Okay, well, what are we going to do? You know, timeout doesn't mean a thing. This is what a lot of our children were raised on.
Modeling is imitating what the child experiences.
They hit you and you feel all their pain. You don't want to feel all of that pain compacted into one hit.
And we're the only industrialized country on earth where it's still legal in our school systems. An educator can hit a student and it's called discipline.
The fact that the United States allows students to be paddled in 19 states is really out of step with where the rest of the world is going.
You know, what you do in your home is certainly a privacy issue between that. I'm looking at what's being done in my public schools.
And it's not a very popular idea either. In a poll done in 2005 by Survey USA, they asked people from all 50 states if they thought that corporal punishment in schools was all right. Over 3/4 said it wasn't, meaning that most people in the United States do not want it in our schools. Now, I'm not saying that nobody believes that corporal punishment in schools is okay, because some people do. And even when 9 students from a high school in Texas were asked if they would rather be paddled than go to detention, they all said that they would take the paddle. But that thought is not in the majority, and science has shown that it's not a good idea. Besides physical damage, which can include severe muscle injury, extensive blood clotting or hematomas, whiplash damage, and hemorrhaging, it can also, and more prominently, lead to psychological damage. Physical punishment damages the trust between educator and student, degrades the learning environment, makes it harder for kids to learn, and increases aggression, disruptive behavior, crime, and delinquency. These attributes are allowed to be attached to the student by our teachers and are then carried into adulthood, making our country a worse and more violent place to live. One of the main arguments for corporal punishment is the quote from the Bible saying, "Spare the rod, spoil the child." And people take that to mean that if a child is not beaten, then they will be spoiled. But that is up for interpretation. Another possible meaning is to use the rod as a guiding rod, like one you would use for sheep. So instead of advocating abuse, it would be advocating guidance. And school should be a place of guidance and learning. That is what it was intended to be. And when a child is hit, especially by an authority, then they not only learn that violence is okay, but also not to stand up for themselves when they are being physically harmed. And then these children are released onto the world to make decisions about our nation's future. So, what is the solution? I propose a bill outlawing corporal punishment in all public schools in all 50 states. Corporal punishment is like a tradition in our society and has a history in our public school system. The Supreme Court made their first ruling in 1975 when they said that schools were allowed to use this form of punishment against kids without the consent of their parents. Then, in 1977, they ruled that it was okay to use this form of punishment unless otherwise specified by local law. That same year, Washington, D.C. and Rhode Island banned corporal punishment from their public schools, though New Jersey became the first state 100 years prior to make this decision. It wasn't until 2010 that parents with kids with disabilities were able to opt out of this form of punishment. Then, the following year in 2011, all parents were allowed to opt out. It is now 2014. We have equal rights for all races and all genders, and we should have equal rights for all ages. Let's make 2014 the next big year in the timeline of corporal punishment.